Welcome back to Mr. Midnight. I need to tell you something before we start tonight. What happened to these tourists in Alaska? It's not what you think. Not even close. Some of them walked into the wilderness and never walked back out. Others came back, but they weren't the same people anymore. And one group? Well, nobody knows if they're dead or if they're still out there. These are 7 most disturbing true Alaskan missing tourists horror stories. Real people. Real disappearances. Real terror. The kind of stuff that makes police officers change careers and survivors move to different states just to feel safe again. I'm not going to tell you what's waiting in those stories yet. You'll have to hear it for yourself. But I will say this, after tonight, you'll understand why some places in Alaska have warnings that tourists always ignore. If you're new to Mr. Midnight, hit subscribe and turn on notifications because I bring you the true horror stories that will keep you up at night. Now, let's find out what really happens when people go missing in Alaska. My name is Amy Chen, and I've been an elementary school teacher in Portland for 6 years. I love working with kids. There's something pure about how they see the world, how they notice things adults miss. During summers, I usually spend my break reading, hiking, or practicing photography. It's always been a hobby of mine, nothing serious, just taking pictures of flowers and sunsets with my basic Canon camera. But last July, I decided I wanted to get better at it. That's when I saw Richard Martinez's Facebook ad for a wilderness photography workshop in Alaska. 3 days in Denali National Park, learning advanced techniques from a professional photographer with 15 years of experience. The price was reasonable, and his portfolio looked amazing. Dramatic mountain shots, wildlife photos, the kind of pictures I dreamed of taking. I thought it would be the perfect way to spend part of my summer break. I had no idea those 3 days would destroy everything I thought I knew about reality, and that I'd be the only one coming home. Richard seemed completely normal when we met at the hotel in Anchorage the night before our trip. There were 5 of us total. Me, Janet from the local library, Bob, who owned a mechanic shop, Tyler, who was studying journalism at University of Oregon, and Carol, a retired nurse from Seattle. Richard was maybe 45, friendly but serious about photography. He showed us his expensive equipment, cameras I'd never heard of, lenses that cost more than my car, professional lighting gear. He explained our itinerary, 3 days hiking to remote locations in Denali, learning composition, lighting, and wildlife photography. He had all the proper permits, wilderness training certificates, and emergency equipment. His references checked out. I'd even called 2 previous workshop students who said he was knowledgeable and professional. Richard talked about getting the perfect shot, about patience and dedication. He said the wilderness would test our commitment to the art. I thought he meant physically challenging hikes and early morning wake-up calls. I should have listened more carefully to that word, commitment. The wrongness started on our first morning, about 6 hours into our hike to the initial photography location. We were walking along a ridge trail with incredible views of the Alaska Range when Richard suddenly stopped. He pulled out his camera and started photographing an empty slope across the valley. We thought he was taking landscape shots until he started talking to himself. "Hold that pose," he said quietly. "Perfect. Now turn slightly to the left." Janet asked what he was photographing, and Richard looked confused, almost annoyed. "The family," he said, pointing to the empty mountainside. "Can't you see them? Father, mother, 2 children. They're posing beautifully." We all looked through our cameras, through his camera when he offered it, but saw nothing except rocks, trees, and snow. Richard became increasingly agitated when we told him there was nothing there. "Look harder," he insisted. "They're right there, clear as day." The woman is wearing a blue dress. The mountainside was completely empty. As we continued hiking, Richard's behavior got stranger. Every few hundred yards, he'd stop to photograph empty spaces, claiming he saw people who weren't there. He took hundreds of photos of the same ridgeline, insisting there were families, hikers, even children playing in areas where no humans could possibly survive. He started having full conversations with these invisible people, directing elaborate photo shoots. "Could you move closer together? The lighting is perfect right now." When Tyler asked to see the photos on Richard's camera display, Richard clutched it protectively. "You wouldn't understand the composition," he said. "These are once-in-a-lifetime shots. But when Tyler finally got a glimpse of the camera's LCD screen, it showed exactly what we LCD saw with our eyes: empty wilderness. Richard was photographing nothing, but in his mind, he was capturing something extraordinary. By evening, when we set up camp, Richard's condition had gotten much worse. He spent hours arranging professional lighting equipment around our campsite, claiming he was preparing for a group portrait session. He kept talking about dozens of invisible subjects who were gathering for photos. All night long, we heard camera flashes going off and Richard's voice directing his imaginary models. "Beautiful, now everyone, look at me, big smiles. This will be perfect for the portfolio." None of us slept. Tyler tried to approach Richard around 3 a.m., suggesting maybe he needed to rest, and Richard screamed at him for ruining the most important shoot of my career. He accused Tyler of trying to scare away his subjects. When Tyler reached for Richard's camera, Richard grabbed a metal tripod and swung it at him. Tyler barely dodged it. We realized we were trapped in the wilderness with someone who was having a complete mental breakdown. Day 2 was when things became truly terrifying. Richard stopped acknowledging we existed unless we interfered with his work. He was setting up increasingly dangerous shots, positioning himself on cliff edges to photograph people he claimed were standing in midair over ravines. We begged him to come back from the edge, but he'd scream that we were ruining his once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. He hadn't eaten or drunk water since the previous morning, but he didn't seem to notice. Every moment was spent photographing his hallucinations with desperate intensity. His eyes were bloodshot, his hands shaking, but he kept insisting these invisible people were waiting for him. "They're finally trusting me," he kept saying. "They've never let anyone photograph them before." The worst part was watching him delete photos we knew he'd taken of real landscapes, claiming they were contaminated by our presence. By afternoon, Richard's paranoia had gotten completely out of control. He became convinced that we weren't his photography students at all, but competing photographers trying to steal his exclusive subjects. He hid our backpacks, destroyed our map, and scattered our hiking gear. When we demanded our equipment back, he screamed that we were industrial spies sent to sabotage him. He started taking photos of us, but the way he looked at us had changed. We weren't Amy, Janet, Bob, Tyler, and Carol anymore. In his mind, we were threatening strangers with weapons. He barricaded himself behind a pile of camera equipment and wouldn't let us approach. Bob tried to retrieve our confiscated gear, and Richard struck him in the head with a heavy telephoto lens. Blood poured down Bob's face as he staggered backward. We realized Richard wasn't just confused, he was dangerous. We had no choice but to leave Richard behind and try to hike back to the ranger station without proper equipment or navigation tools. Carol, being the oldest at 68, collapsed from exhaustion after 8 hours of difficult hiking. We had to take turns supporting her weight while moving through unmarked wilderness. Tyler volunteered to hike ahead and find help, carrying only a small camera and one water bottle. He promised to bring back rescue teams within hours. That was the last time we saw him alive. We waited at a stream for 6 hours, but Tyler never returned. Janet was developing severe altitude sickness, nausea, headaches, disorientation. Bob's head wound had stopped bleeding, but he was pale and weak. Carol and I made the decision to continue toward what we hoped was the main trail, leaving Janet and Bob at a sheltered spot by the stream. Carol and I found Tyler's body the next morning at the bottom of a steep ravine. His neck was broken, his camera strap still around his shoulder. What haunted us was that his camera contained photos. Dozens of pictures from Richard's first 2 days, showing empty wilderness that Tyler had apparently been documenting. The final photos on Tyler's camera showed Richard's abandoned equipment and empty landscape shots, as if Tyler had been trying to create evidence of what had really happened. We couldn't tell if Tyler had fallen accidentally while trying to climb down for a better signal, or if something else had happened. But seeing his broken body convinced us that we were running out of time. Carol and I made it to a ranger station after 5 days of hiking, dehydrated and exhausted. When we brought search teams back to our last known location, they found only Richard's photography equipment scattered around the abandoned campsite. Richard, Janet, and Bob were gone completely. The search continued for 3 weeks, covering hundreds of square miles with helicopters, dogs, and experienced wilderness teams. They found no trace of the 3 missing people. It was as if Alaska had swallowed them entirely. The evidence of what happened was Richard's abandoned camera equipment and the thousands of photos he'd taken. What investigators found on Richard's cameras disturbed everyone involved in the case. Over 4,000 photos from 3 days, all showing empty wilderness that Richard had meticulously annotated with detailed captions about imaginary people. Beautiful family portrait at sunrise. Children playing by the stream. Elderly couple celebrating anniversary. But the most chilling discovery was Richard's final series of photos, pictures of our group where he'd written captions describing us as armed intruders and dangerous strangers threatening the subjects. In Richard's mind, we had transformed from students into enemies. Medical experts who reviewed the case determined that Richard had suffered a complete psychotic break triggered by undiagnosed schizophrenia, made worse by extreme isolation and the stress of leading a wilderness expedition. His social media history, which we hadn't seen before the trip, showed increasingly paranoid posts about other photographers, stealing his vision and copying his techniques. Richard had been experiencing visual hallucinations for months, but he'd hidden his condition by working alone. The workshop was apparently his first time leading a group in over a year. The wilderness isolation had triggered a complete break from reality. The search for Janet and Bob continued for weeks. Investigators found evidence that Bob had tried to build an emergency shelter using branches and his jacket, but severe weather had hit the area during the night they disappeared. Temperatures had dropped below freezing, and rangers believed they couldn't have survived without proper equipment. Their bodies were never recovered. Alaska's wilderness is unforgiving. Thousands of square miles where people simply vanish forever. I was the only member of our photography group to survive those 3 days. For months afterward, I couldn't look at cameras without seeing Richard's obsessed expression as he photographed his invisible subject. I had nightmares about the sound of his camera flash going off all night and his voice directing impossible photo shoots. I changed my locks, my phone number, and even considered moving to a different city. The surviving families of Janet, Bob, and Tyler sued Richard's estate and the adventure tourism company that had promoted his workshops, but there wasn't much money to recover. Richard had been working freelance, barely making ends meet, using the workshop fees to pay his own bills. I returned to teaching that fall, but I never practiced photography again. My camera sits in a closet, unused. When people ask me about my summer vacation, I tell them I went hiking in Alaska. I don't mention the rest. Sometimes I wonder what Richard saw in those empty landscapes, what invisible people he was so desperate to capture. Mental health professionals told me that his hallucinations seemed incredibly real to him, that he genuinely believed he was photographing subjects that only he could see. But late at night, when I can't sleep, I sometimes wonder if Richard saw something we couldn't, something that wanted to be photographed by someone who was losing their grip on reality. I'll never know what happened to Janet, Bob, and Tyler in those final days, or whether Richard survived longer than we thought. All I know is that wilderness photography workshops now require psychological evaluations for guides, and that 3 families lost their loved ones because we trusted the wrong person to lead us into the wilderness. I'm Amy Chen, and this is why I'll never set foot in Alaska again. My name is Sarah Peterson, and I work at First National Bank in Fairbanks. I've been planning this family reunion for 8 months. 12 of us, all crammed into one big cabin for a week. It seemed like such a good idea back then. Asterisk, car door slams, excited voices, asterisk, Sarah, this place is amazing. That's my brother Mark. He drives delivery trucks for a living, so he knows his way around Alaska better than most. If Mark was impressed, this cabin had to be special. Asterisk, asterisk, EXT. Aurora Ridge Cabin, day asterisk, asterisk. The cabin sat on a hill overlooking the forest. 2 stories, big windows, wraparound porch. The rental company called it a luxury wilderness retreat. For $2,400 a week, it better be luxury. Dad was already walking around the property, hands on his hips. Robert Peterson, 62 years old, retired from the phone company. He always checked everything twice. Foundation looks solid, he called out. Good drainage around the house. Mom came up beside me, keys jingling in her hand. Betty Peterson, office receptionist at the local clinic for 30 years. She had this way of organizing chaos that made family gatherings actually work. Kitchen's fully stocked, she said, checking her list. Bedrooms are clean. We picked a good one, honey. Asterisk, asterisk, int, cabin. Main room, day, asterisk, asterisk. The kids ran straight to the loft. Mark's 2 boys, Tommy and Jake, plus our cousin's kids. Their footsteps echoed on the wooden floors like drumbeats. Jennifer, Mark's wife, was already unpacking in the kitchen. She worked part-time at the grocery store and knew how to feed a crowd. Look at this view. Our cousin David pointed out the big window. You can see for miles. I should have paid more attention to what was outside that window. The trees looked wrong somehow. Too dense, too dark, like they were hiding something. Asterisk, asterisk, int, cabin. Sarah's bedroom, night, asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Soft sounds of family settling in for the night. Asterisk, day 1 went perfect. We grilled burgers, played cards, told stories, normal family stuff. I texted my friend back home, cabin is gorgeous, perfect family time ahead. I should have known better than to say, perfect. Nothing's ever perfect. Asterisk, asterisk, int, cabin, kitchen, morning, day 2, asterisk, 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 coffee brewing, bacon sizzling, asterisk, morning, brought the smell of bacon and coffee. Jennifer was already cooking breakfast for 12 people. She had this system down to a science. Everyone sleep okay? She asked. Mark rubbed his eyes. Weird dreams. Kept waking up with headaches. Dad sat at the table, staring out the window. He'd been up since 5, just sitting there. When I said good morning, he turned to look at me like he'd never seen me before. Dad, you okay? He blinked a few times, then smiled. Sorry, sweetheart. Just admiring the view. But he wasn't looking at the view anymore. He was looking at me. And something in his eyes felt cold. Asterisk, asterisk, ext, cabin, back porch. Da asterisk, 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 children. Playing. Adults talking quietly, asterisk. The second day should have been relaxing. The kids went fishing with David. The adults sat on the porch, drinking beer and catching up. Normal vacation stuff. But Dad kept staring. Not at the forest or the mountains. At us. Like he was studying us. When Mom asked him to help with lunch, he just kept staring. Robert? Mom touched his arm. You feeling all right? He jerked away like she'd burned him. Don't touch me. We all went quiet. Dad never talked to Mom like that. Never. Asterisk, asterisk, int, cabin.man room. Evening, asterisk, 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 crackling fire, quiet conversation, asterisk. That night, Mark started acting strange too. He sat by the fireplace, but he wasn't watching the flames. He was watching us. His eyes moved from person to person, like he was counting. Uncle Mark? Tommy, his 8-year-old son, crawled into his lap. Want to read with me? Mark's face went blank. He looked at Tommy like the boy was a stranger. Who are you? Tommy's lip started to tremble. I'm Tommy. I'm your son. Jennifer snatched Tommy away. Mark, what's wrong with you? Mark blinked, and suddenly, he was normal again. Sorry, buddy. Daddy's just tired. But his voice sounded hollow. Asterisk, asterisk, int. Cabin, Sarah's bedroom. Night, asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Muffled sounds through walls, restless movement. Asterisk, I couldn't sleep. Through the walls, I heard Mark pacing in his room. Back and forth, back and forth. Sometimes he would stop, and I'd hear him talking. But Jennifer wasn't answering. Around 3 in the morning, I heard footsteps in the hallway. I cracked my door open and saw Dad standing at the big window in the main room. Just standing there in his pajamas, looking out at nothing. Dad, I whispered. He turned around slowly. In the moonlight, his face looked different, thinner. His eyes seemed too big for his head. This is home now, he said. His voice was flat, emotionless. We don't need to leave anymore. Dad, this is just a vacation. Rental. We go home on Sunday. He smiled, but it wasn't Dad's smile. No, this is home. This has always been home. I shut the door and locked it. Asterisk, asterisk, int. Cabin, kitchen, morning, day 3. Asterisk, 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 tense atmosphere, forced normalcy. Asterisk, Friday morning. Dad and Mark sat together at the kitchen table. They weren't talking to anyone else. They just whispered to each other and stared at the rest of us. Jennifer was crying while she made coffee. "Something's wrong with Mark," she told me. "He doesn't remember me. He keeps asking who I am and why I'm in his house." Tommy had drawn a picture of the family. In his crayon drawing, Grandpa and Uncle Mark had black scribbles for faces. At the bottom, he'd written, "Grandpa won't talk to me. 8-year-olds don't lie about stuff like that. Asterisk, asterisk, int. Cabin, MAN room. Afternoon, asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Growing tension, hushed conversations, asterisk." By afternoon, Dad and Mark weren't just acting strange. They were acting dangerous. When Mom tried to pack some bags, Dad grabbed her wrist. "Nobody leaves," he said. "This is our home. These people are trying to take us away from our home. Robert, I'm your wife. These are our children." Dad looked at her with complete confusion. "I don't know you. Why are you in my house?" That's when I knew we had to get out. I sent a text to my friend. "Something wrong with Dad and Mark. Acting like different people. Should we leave early?" The text never went through. No signal. Asterisk, asterisk, int. Cabin, various rooms. Evening, asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Scattered conversations. Growing fear. Asterisk. We tried to keep things normal for the kids, but it was impossible. Dad and Mark followed us around the cabin like guards. They blocked the doors. When David tried to go outside for firewood, Mark stopped him. "You can't leave," Mark said. "Nobody leaves home." "Mark, this isn't your home. We're renting this place." Mark's face went blank again. "I've always lived here. You're trying to trick me." Jennifer tried calling 911, but her phone had no signal. None of our phones worked. 12 cell phones, all dead. Asterisk, asterisk, int. Cabin, kitchen, night, asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Water running, quiet desperation, asterisk. That night, I was filling a glass of water when I noticed something wrong with the tap. The water looked cloudy. It tasted metallic, like pennies. I found David in the living room. "Have you noticed anything weird about the water?" "Everything's weird about this place," he said. "Look at this." He showed me a journal he'd found in a drawer. The handwriting wasn't ours, but the words were familiar. Day 3. Robert and Mark acting strange. Won't let us leave. Something wrong with their minds. Different handwriting below that. Day 4. More of them changed. Kids are scared. Water tastes like metal. Another entry. Day 5. Only 3 of us left unchanged. They say this is home now. They don't remember their real lives. The journal had dozens of entries. Different families, different handwriting. All the same story. Asterisk, asterisk, int. Cabin, Sarah's bedroom. Late night, asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Desperate whispering, fear. Asterisk, I found Jennifer and the kids hiding in the bedroom. "We have to get out," I whispered. "Tonight." "How?" "Mark standing guard at the front door. Your dad's at the back. There's a window in the bathroom. We can climb down." Jennifer shook her head. "What about Mark? What about your dad? We can't just leave them." "They're not them anymore," I said. "Whatever's happening to them, it's getting worse." But it was too late. When we opened the bedroom door, Dad and Mark were standing in the hallway. They weren't alone. Mom was with them now. And David? Their faces were blank, emotionless. "Why are you trying to leave home?" Mom asked. But it wasn't Mom's voice. It was flat, empty. Asterisk, asterisk, int. Cabin, main room, early morning, day 4. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Daylight filtering through windows, eerie, calm, asterisk. By morning, only Jennifer, the kids, and I. They were left unchanged. The others sat around the main room like statues. They didn't blink much. They barely moved. When the kids cried, the changed family members just stared at them. No comfort, no concern. Like they were watching strangers. "Mommy," Tommy whispered to Jennifer. "Why won't Daddy talk to me?" Jennifer was crying again. "I don't know, baby." Mark heard her and turned around. "Stop making noise. This is a quiet house." "Mark, I'm your wife. That's your son." Mark looked at Tommy with complete confusion. "I don't have a son. I live alone in this house." Asterisk, asterisk, int. Cabin. Bathroom. Afternoon, asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Running water. Growing desperation. Asterisk. I was washing my face when I saw it in the mirror. The water from the tap was leaving stains on the white porcelain. Dark metallic stains. That's when I remembered something from work. At the bank, we'd had training about environmental hazards because of property loans. Mercury contamination could cause neurological croups, damage, memory loss, personality changes. I ran to find Jennifer. The water's poisoned, I told her. That's what's happening to them. What do you mean poisoned? Mercury, maybe something else. It's making them sick, making them forget who they are. Jennifer looked around the cabin with new understanding. How long do we have? I didn't want to answer that question. Asterisk, asterisk, int. Cabin. Main room. Evening, asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Forced calm, underlying terror, asterisk. The changed family members sat in a circle, holding hands. They were humming. Not a song any of us recognized. Just a low, wordless humming that seemed to come from the walls themselves. Dad looked at me and smiled. Join us, Sarah. You belong here too. This isn't our home, Dad. Yes, it is. It's always been our home. You just need to remember. Mom nodded. The house remembers us. We remember the house. I wrote in my journal. Dad and Mark say the cabin is our real home now. They won't let us leave. Something is very wrong with their minds. It was the last thing I ever wrote. Asterisk, asterisk, int. Cabin, various rooms. Night, asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Subtle sound changes, growing influence, asterisk. That night, the house started talking to me. Not with words, but with feelings. Warm, comfortable feelings that said I belonged here, that I'd always belonged here. I caught myself humming along with the others. The sound felt natural, like breathing. Jennifer was fighting it too. Sarah, we have to stay awake. We have to keep thinking about home, our real home. But what was our real home? The memories felt fuzzy now. Had I always lived in this cabin? Had I always worked at the bank? Or was that just a dream? The metal taste in my mouth was getting stronger. Asterisk, asterisk, int. Cabin, main room, morning, day 5, asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Peaceful atmosphere, false comfort, asterisk. When I woke up, I was sitting in the circle with the others. Jennifer was beside me, humming. The kids were humming too. We were all holding hands. Good morning, family, Dad said. But now his voice sounded normal again. Warm, loving. Good morning, I replied. The words came automatically. Wait, why was I surprised? We'd always lived here together. This was our home. This had always been our home. In the distance, I could hear helicopters. Strange. Why would helicopters be flying over our house? Should we see what they want? Jennifer asked. Dad smiled peacefully. No need. We're home. We're all home now. The humming started again. I joined in. It felt right. The metallic taste didn't bother me anymore. Asterisk, asterisk, ext. Aerial view. Cabin, day. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Helicopter sounds fading. Ominous silence, asterisk. The search and rescue teams would find the cabin empty 3 days later. All the cars still in the driveway. All the belongings still inside. Beds unmade, food spoiling in the refrigerator. They would find journals from 23 different families, all telling the same story, all ending the same way. You would find children's shoes scattered in the forest, torn clothing hanging from tree branches 15 miles away. They would test the water and find mercury levels 47 times above the safe limit. They would discover the abandoned mine beneath the property, the contaminated soil that had been covered up for decades, but they would never find the Peterson family. Asterisk, asterisk, int. Cabin, main room, present day, asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Peaceful silence, eternal waiting, asterisk. Because we're still here, we've always been here. This is our home. And when the next family arrives for their vacation, we'll be waiting to welcome them home too. The cabin remembers everyone who stays here. And eventually, everyone remembers that they belong to the cabin. Forever. My name is Jennifer Walsh, and I've been a dental hygienist for 8 years in Sacramento. I clean teeth, take x-rays, and see about 40 patients a week. I know the difference between healthy gums and gingivitis, between a cavity and a crown that needs replacing. My world is facts, evidence, things you can see and measure. But what happened during my 28th birthday trip to Alaska destroyed everything I thought I knew about reality itself. The plan was simple: 5 days in Anchorage, then a private Aurora flight on my actual birthday, September 28th. I'd saved for 6 months, researching everything online. That's how I found Aurora Sky Tours, a small company run by Stephen Kowalski, a former Anchorage taxi driver who'd gotten his pilot's license 2 years earlier. His website showed beautiful Aurora photos with the tagline, "Private flights, see what others can't." The reviews seemed genuine. 24 5-star ratings, all mentioning Steve's knowledge of the best viewing spots. What I didn't know was that 3 tourists had already gone missing that summer on Steve's flights. Steve picked me up at the Marriott in a clean white Honda Accord at 7:30 p.m. He was maybe 55, with salt and pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses. Professional looking. He smelled like aftershave and coffee, wore a pressed blue shirt with Aurora Sky Tours embroidered on the pocket. Everything about him seemed normal except for one small thing. He kept touching his left temple, like he had a headache that wouldn't go away. "Beautiful night for flying," he said, adjusting his rearview mirror for the 3rd time. "Aurora activity is going to be spectacular. Absolutely spectacular." The drive to the airfield took 25 minutes through Anchorage's industrial district. Steve talked constantly about weather patterns, solar activity, the best altitudes for Aurora photography. But every few minutes, he'd pause mid-sentence and listen to something I couldn't hear. When I asked if his radio was on, he looked confused and said there was no radio in the car. Merrill Field sat on the edge of town, surrounded by chain-link fence topped with razor wire. The smell of aviation fuel hung heavy in the cold air. Steve's hangar was at the far end, isolated from the other buildings. Inside, a 6-seat Cessna 206 gleamed under fluorescent lights. The plane looked well-maintained, clean white paint with blue trim matching Steve's shirt. "She's beautiful, isn't she?" Steve ran his hand along the wing like he was petting a dog. "Bought her last spring. She's taken a lot of people to see things they'll never forget." Something in his tone made my stomach clench, but I pushed the feeling away. I was a tourist. This was supposed to be magical. Steve did his pre-flight inspection methodically, checking fuel levels, testing control surfaces, examining the engine. Everything looked professional, but I noticed he kept talking to himself. Not mumbling, but having actual conversations, complete with pauses for responses from someone who wasn't there. "Weather looks good. Yes, I know we're behind schedule. She seems nice enough. No, I don't think she'll be a problem." When I asked who he was talking to, Steve smiled and tapped his headset, even though he wasn't wearing one. We took off at 8:47 p.m. I know the exact time because I texted my sister Sarah as we climbed into the night sky. "Just took off. Aurora, here I come." The city lights of Anchorage fell away below us, replaced by endless darkness, broken only by occasional pinpricks of light from remote cabins. Steve seemed calmer in the air, his hands steady on the controls. The cockpit was warm, filled with the steady drone of the engine and the occasional crackle of radio chatter from other aircraft. He explained that we'd fly northwest to get above the cloud layer where the aurora would be most visible. "See that green glow on the horizon?" Steve pointed through the windshield. "That's just the beginning. Wait until you see what happens when we reach the special area." The aurora was already visible, faint green curtains dancing against the stars. But Steve kept flying northwest, deeper into the wilderness. After an hour, I asked when we'd stop to watch. "Soon," Steve said, his voice different now, flatter. "We're going somewhere the other tours don't know about. Somewhere the tourists never come back from." The way he said "never come back from" made my hands go cold. "What do you mean?" Steve looked at me with eyes that seemed suddenly empty, like someone had turned off a light behind them. "You'll see." That's when I noticed the smell, something sour and metallic that hadn't been there during takeoff. It was coming from behind my seat. I turned around and saw a large cooler strapped down in the cargo area. The smell was definitely coming from there. "What's in the cooler?" I asked. "Supplies," Steve said without looking back. "For the photography." But there was no photography equipment visible anywhere in the plane. By the second hour, we were flying over terrain I'd never seen on any Alaska tourism map. Jagged mountains gave way to a vast white plain, broken by dark crevasses that looked like knife wounds in the earth. The aurora had intensified, but instead of the peaceful green curtains I'd expected, the lights seemed angry, pulsing red and purple like an infected wound. Steve was talking to his invisible radio contact again. "Base, this is Aurora 7. Yes, I have the package. No complications so far. ETA to drop site is 30 minutes. "Who are you talking to?" I demanded. Steve turned to look at me, and I saw that his pupils were completely dilated, black holes in his pale eyes. "The people who pay me to bring them what they need." "What do they need?" "Fresh supplies for the research station." "What kind of research?" Steve smiled, and I noticed for the first time that his teeth were stained brown, like he'd been drinking something that had sat too long. "The kind that requires renewable resources." The engine started making a new sound then. Not the steady drone I'd grown used to, but a rhythmic knocking like someone trapped inside trying to get out. Steve checked his instruments and frowned. "That's not supposed to happen yet," he muttered. "We're still 20 minutes from the drop site." "Drop site for what?" But Steve was too busy fighting with the controls to answer. The plane was losing altitude, and something was definitely wrong with the engine. Through the windshield, I could see we were approaching what looked like a small landing strip carved into the ice. Just two parallel lines of lights in the middle of nowhere. "There," Steve said with relief. "Right on schedule." As we descended, I could make out buildings around the landing strip, prefab structures with no windows and what looked like heavy equipment. Most disturbing were the lights, not the warm yellow glow of normal buildings, but harsh white surgical lights that hurt to look at. "What is this place?" I asked. "Research station," Steve said as he lined up for landing. "They study tourist behavior, how long people can survive in controlled environments, what makes them scream, how much they remember afterward." The plane touched down hard on the ice runway. As we rolled to a stop, I could see figures emerging from the buildings, people in white coveralls and surgical masks. They were wheeling gurneys toward the plane. "Steve, we need to leave, right now." But Steve was already shutting down the engine. "Can't leave," he said cheerfully. "You're the delivery." That's when I understood, the smell from the cooler. The missing tourists from Steve's previous flights. The research station that wasn't on any map. I was supposed to be the next person who never came back. I fumbled for my emergency beacon, a GPS device I'd brought for hiking, and activated it with shaking fingers. The red light started blinking immediately. Steve saw the beacon, and his face changed completely. The empty eyes filled with rage, and when he spoke, his voice was different, deeper, like someone else was talking through him. "You stupid bitch, do you have any idea what you've done? They needed you intact. Now we'll have to damage you first." The figures in white were approaching the plane. I could see they were carrying restraints and what looked like medical equipment. One of them tapped on Steve's window and made a gesture toward the back of the plane. "Time to go," Steve said, reaching for his seatbelt. "Don't worry, the research doesn't take long. Most people stop screaming after the first few hours." I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed the controls and yanked them hard to the left. The plane lurched sideways, throwing Steve against his door. While he was stunned, I reached across and hit the engine starter. The propeller began to turn. "What are you doing?" Steve screamed. "Getting us out of here." I'd never flown a plane before, but I'd watched enough movies to know the basics. Throttle forward, pull back on the stick to climb. The plane jumped forward on the ice, scattering the figures in white coveralls. I could hear them shouting over the engine noise. Steve was fighting me for the controls, but I had leverage and desperation on my side. The plane lifted off the ice just as one of the white coverall figures raised what looked like a tranquilizer gun. "You don't understand," Steve was saying as we climbed into the night sky. "They'll find us. They have ways of tracking the planes, and when they do." But his voice was changing again, becoming confused and frightened instead of threatening. Where are we? What happened to the research station?" I looked down and saw only empty ice. No buildings, no lights, no landing strip. Just endless white wilderness stretching to the horizon. "The research station," I said carefully. "Where was it?" Steve looked around the cockpit like he'd never seen it before. "Research station? I don't remember a research station. Weren't we supposed to be looking at the aurora?" The change in him was so complete, it was like watching someone wake up from a dream. The dilated pupils returned to normal. The brown stains were gone from his teeth. Even the smell from the cooler had disappeared. "Jennifer," he said, reading my name from the flight manifest. "Are you okay? You look terrified." I didn't know how to answer. The GPS beacon was still blinking in my hand, but now I wasn't sure what I was supposed to be rescued from. We flew back to Anchorage in silence. Steve seemed genuinely confused about why we'd been in the air so long and why I was holding an emergency beacon. When we landed at Merrill Field, the FBI was waiting. Agent Morrison and Agent Chen questioned me for 3 hours that night and 2 more times over the next week. Their story was simple. Steve Kowalski was suffering from early-onset dementia with severe paranoid episodes. His medical records showed he'd been having increasingly elaborate delusions for months. Sometimes he believed he was working for secret government programs. Other times, he thought ordinary tourists were part of conspiracy theories. "The research station you described," Agent Chen explained, "Steve has been talking about that for weeks. His family says he draws maps of it, plans elaborate missions to deliver supplies. But it doesn't exist." "What about the other missing tourists?" "There are no missing tourists," Agent Morrison said gently. "We checked every flight Steve has taken in the past year. Every passenger returned safely. Most of them reported that Steve seemed confused or disoriented, but no one was ever harmed." They showed me Steve's flight log. Every entry was accounted for. Every passenger had filed positive reviews online. The 3 missing tourists I thought I'd researched, there was no record of them anywhere. "The cooler you smelled," Agent Chen continued, "contained Steve's lunch and some camera equipment he uses to photograph the aurora for his website. Airport security checked it thoroughly. But I knew what I'd experienced. The empty eyes, the voice change, the landing strip with surgical lights. What about the GPS beacon signal? You tracked it to find us." "Yes," Agent Morrison nodded. "You activated it while Steve was having an episode. He became disoriented and landed on a frozen lake, thinking it was a runway. When we arrived, he was completely confused about where he was and why you seemed frightened. But the beacon led you to us. That proves something unusual happened." "It proves you were scared enough to call for help," Agent Chen said, "which was the right thing to do. But Steve never threatened you, never took you to any research station. His plane's GPS shows you flew in a normal pattern for aurora viewing before landing on the lake due to his confusion." I spent 2 more days in Anchorage, going over the details with FBI investigators. They were kind but firm. Steve was a sick man whose delusions had infected my perception of reality. He was placed in memory care, his pilot's license revoked, Aurora Sky Tours shut down. The case file reads, "Tourist experienced shared paranoid episode with dementia patient. No evidence of criminal activity. Subject's mental condition created false threat perception in passenger." I moved to Portland after that, started working at a dental practice where no one knew about my Alaska incident. But the questions never left me. Every night, I wondered, did Steve really take me to a research station that tortured tourists, or did I spend 4 hours in a plane with a confused, sick man whose delusions became my reality? The GPS beacon sits in my desk drawer at work. Sometimes I take it out and look at it, remembering that night. Because here's what the FBI never explained. If Steve was just having a dementia episode, if the research station was just his delusion, then why did my emergency beacon work perfectly to summon help? And why, when I got home to Sacramento, did I find a message on my answering machine from a number with no caller ID? Just static, and then a voice that sounded exactly like Steve's. "The research station is real, Jennifer. They're still waiting for you." Steve Kowalski died in memory care 6 months later. The obituary said he passed peacefully, surrounded by family. But the nurse who called to inform me mentioned something strange. In his final days, Steve kept asking about the delivery he never completed and drawing maps of a place that looked exactly like the research station I'd described to the FBI. Maps the nursing home staff said he'd never drawn before. I still have the emergency beacon, and sometimes, late at night when I'm closing up the dental office, I hear my phone buzz with messages from numbers that don't exist, playing recordings of voices that sound like people screaming in a place where the lights are too bright and the research never ends. Because the most terrifying truth about Alaska isn't that people go missing there. It's that sometimes they come back, but part of them never left. My name is Alex Martinez, and I've been working as an insurance claims adjuster for Southwestern Mutual for 8 years. I investigate everything from house fires to car accidents, documenting damage and determining payouts. I've seen people at their worst moments, after tornadoes destroyed their homes, after accidents changed their lives forever. I thought I'd seen every kind of human tragedy possible. But what happened during our Labor Day hiking trip to Denali National Park in Alaska showed me there are things out there that no insurance policy could ever cover. I organized this trip because I needed a break from Phoenix heat and endless paperwork. Maya Gonzalez, who works as a cashier at our local grocery store, and Ben Williams, who does maintenance at the apartment complex where I live, were my hiking buddies. We'd done day hikes around Arizona together, but Alaska was going to be our big adventure. None of us were experienced wilderness hikers, which is why I insisted we hire a professional guide. Thomas Koyukon came highly recommended by the Park Service. He was Athabascan native, probably in his 50s, with deep knowledge of the area. During our safety briefing at park headquarters, Thomas covered the usual stuff: bear safety, weather changes, emergency procedures. But then he started talking about something called kushtaka. These are shapeshifters, Thomas said, completely serious. They appear as people you know, animals you trust. They lure travelers away from safe paths into dangerous areas where people disappear forever. Maya laughed nervously. Like, actually shapeshifters? That's just folklore, right? Thomas looked directly at her. My grandfather taught me these stories. His grandfather taught him. For generations, my people avoided certain areas during specific seasons because of kushtaka activity. The Park Service knows about the disappearance rates here, but they don't talk about why they're so high. Ben rolled his actor's eyes. Come on, man. We're paying good money for a guide, not ghost stories. But Thomas continued anyway. If you see someone familiar in the wilderness who shouldn't be there, don't follow them. If you hear voices calling you from off the trail, don't respond. Kushtaka can perfectly mimic voices of people you love, even people who are dead. They study human behavior, learn your weaknesses, then use them against you. He gave us specific warnings. Never follow anyone who seemed wrong somehow. Never trust familiar faces in impossible locations. And most importantly, if we got separated from the group, follow water downstream toward civilization. The first day went perfectly. Beautiful scenery, wildlife sightings of caribou and eagles, and Thomas shared traditional stories around our campfire that night. His knowledge of the area was incredible. He could identify animal tracks from a distance, predict weather changes by cloud formations, and navigate without GPS using landmarks his family had used for generations. Day 2 morning, everything changed. Maya was packing her sleeping bag when she suddenly stopped and stared into the forest. "Oh my God, that's Sarah," she said, pointing about 200 yards away through the trees. I looked but only saw forest shadows. "Sarah who?" "My sister Sarah. What's she doing here?" Maya called out loudly. "Sarah, Sarah, over here." Maya started walking quickly toward the tree line, but Thomas grabbed her arm firmly. "Your sister is in Phoenix, not Alaska," he said urgently. "No, I saw her. She was wearing that blue jacket she always wears, and she waved at me." Maya pointed again, but now there was nothing there. Thomas immediately began scanning the forest with his binoculars. "We need to break camp now. Pack everything. We're leaving this area immediately." "Why? What's wrong?" Ben asked. "They've found us," Thomas said grimly. "When Kushtaka start appearing as family members, it means they're actively hunting your group." We packed quickly, but I noticed Thomas kept looking over his shoulder and checking his GPS more frequently than usual. The relaxed atmosphere from yesterday was completely gone. That afternoon, while hiking along a ridge trail, Ben suddenly stopped walking. "Do you guys hear that?" he asked. We all listened. I heard wind through trees, our footsteps on gravel, nothing else. "It's my dad," Ben said, his voice getting emotional. "He's calling my name from down in that ravine. He sounds hurt." Ben's father had died from a heart attack 6 months earlier. We'd all attended the funeral. "Ben, your father is gone," I said gently. "There's nobody down there." But Ben was already moving toward the ravine edge. "No, listen, Dad, I'm coming." Thomas physically restrained Ben from climbing down. "This is exactly what I warned you about. Kushtaka often use voices of deceased relatives because the emotional pull is too strongest. Ben struggled against Thomas's grip. You don't understand. He needs help. I can hear him calling my name. From my position, the ravine looked empty, just rocks and scattered trees about 50 feet down. No sign of anyone, living or dead. Around sunset, we were setting up camp near a river when Maya pointed across the water. Look, there's a park ranger trying to get our attention. About 100 yards away, a figure in official-looking uniform was waving at us and gesturing for us to come over. The person called out in a clear, authoritative voice, "Emergency situation, you need to cross the river immediately. Someone in your group has been reported missing." Thomas immediately pulled out his binoculars and studied the figure carefully. After a long moment, he lowered them with a troubled expression. "That's not a real ranger," he said. "The proportions are wrong. Arms too long, face slightly distorted, movements too fluid. Real humans don't move like that." As we watched, the ranger's appearance began shifting subtly. Facial features seemed to move slightly, body proportions changed, and the voice became just a little too perfect, like a recording. "This is what I meant about Kushtaka," Thomas explained. "They're master mimics, but they can't perfectly replicate human anatomy. There's always something slightly wrong if you know what to look for." The fake ranger continued calling to us for about 10 minutes, then simply walked into the forest and disappeared. That night was terrifying. We were surrounded by familiar voices calling from the darkness around our camp. Maya's mother, calling her name and asking why she hadn't called home. Ben's ex-girlfriend, saying she needed to talk to him urgently. My brother, David, from Seattle, claiming he'd driven up to surprise me and was lost. Thomas made us stay inside our tents, no matter what we heard. "Going outside means certain death or disappearance," he warned. "They'll lead you away, and you'll never find your way back." The voices got closer and more desperate throughout the night. Maya's mother claimed to have fallen and broken her ankle just outside our camp. Ben's ex-girlfriend said she was being chased by a bear and needed immediate help. My brother insisted his car had broken down just up the trail and he needed assistance. Through our tent walls, we could see shadows of people we recognized walking around our campsite. Maya started crying because she swore she could see her deceased grandmother standing right outside her tent, holding out her arms for a hug. I barely slept. Every voice sounded completely real and authentic. If I hadn't been warned by Thomas, I would have gone outside to help multiple times. Morning revealed the truth. Dozens of humanoid tracks surrounded our camp, far too many for the number of people we'd seen. But the tracks were wrong. Some were too long, others showed extra toe impressions, many had impossible foot positions like toes pointing backward. "They were testing us all night," Thomas said, examining the tracks, seeing which emotional triggers worked best. While we were packing up to leave the area, Thomas suddenly stopped what he was doing and stared toward the tree line. "Wait," he said slowly. "I see my son." A young Athabascan boy, maybe 10 years old, was standing about 50 yards away, partially hidden behind a large pine tree. The boy waved and called, "Papa, come here." I found something amazing. Thomas began walking toward the tree line, despite everything he'd taught us about not following familiar figures. "Thomas, stop," I called. "Remember your own warnings." But Thomas ignored us completely, walking faster toward the boy. "That's definitely my son." Same voice, same gestures. He must have followed us somehow. Thomas disappeared into the forest within minutes. When we followed his tracks, they simply ended in an open clearing, with no explanation. No sign of Thomas or the boy, no indication where they'd gone. We were now completely lost in unmarked wilderness with no guide and no real hiking experience. Without Thomas, everything became 10 times more difficult. Our GPS showed conflicting information, pointing us toward trails that didn't exist. Our emergency satellite communicator couldn't get a signal despite clear skies. Ben started behaving strangely. He kept insisting he could see his apartment building through the trees and tried to walk toward it several times. Maya and I could clearly see it was just empty forest, but Ben's perception was being manipulated somehow. "It's right there," Ben would insist, pointing at nothing. "I can see the parking lot in my truck." We had to physically restrain him multiple times to prevent him from wandering off. On day 4, Maya said she needed to use the bathroom and walked about 50 feet from our camp behind some bushes. Normal stuff. But then we heard her talking to someone in a friendly, relaxed voice, like she was having a casual conversation with an old friend. "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you're here." Maya's voice carried clearly through the forest. "How did you find us? This is so crazy." When Ben and I went to check on her, Maya was gone. But we could still hear her voice moving away through the forest, chatting casually with someone we couldn't see. "Maya," I called. "Maya, come back." Her voice faded into the distance, still talking happily to her invisible companion. I was now completely alone. The psychological warfare intensified immediately. Fake versions of Maya and Ben began approaching my camp regularly, perfectly mimicking their voices and mannerisms, begging me to follow them to safety. "Alex, we found a way out," fake Maya would call. "There's a ranger station just over this ridge. Come on." "Dude, I can see the parking lot from here," fake Ben would insist. "We can get to the car and go home." But I could tell they were fake because their eyes reflected light like an animal's, and they never blinked or breathed naturally. Their movements were just slightly too smooth, too perfect. For 3 days, I was stalked by dozens of fake people I recognized. Co-workers from the insurance office, neighbors from my apartment complex, relatives from Phoenix. They all offered help, directions, food, rescue, all of them trying to lure me away from my camp. I remembered Thomas's emergency advice about following water downstream. Kushtaka supposedly couldn't cross running water, so I packed what I could carry and started hiking along the river we'd camped near. For 3 more days, I followed that river, while being followed by an increasing number of fake people calling my name and offering assistance. Sometimes I recognized them, sometimes they were strangers who claimed to be park rangers or search and rescue volunteers. The fake people would walk parallel to the river on both sides, but none of them ever tried to cross the water. They just kept calling and gesturing for me to come away from the riverbank. On day 7, real park rangers found me along the river, severely dehydrated and suffering from exposure, but alive. I was probably only 6 hours from the main road. The search and rescue operation was massive. Teams covered hundreds of square miles looking for Thomas, Maya, and Ben. They used helicopters, tracking dogs, thermal imaging equipment, nothing. 3 experienced hikers had vanished completely in well-mapped terrain. I told the rangers everything that happened, but I could see in their faces they thought I was suffering from dehydration, hallucinations, or psychological trauma. The official report listed environmental exposure and possible wildlife encounter as probable causes for the disappearances. But later, off the record, several Athabascan elders confirmed that the area where we'd hiked was traditionally avoided due to high Kushtaka activity. They'd been warning people about that region for generations. Rangers did find one piece of disturbing physical evidence throughout the search area, thousands of unusual tracks. Humanoid, but anatomically impossible. The tracks showed clear evidence of bipedal creatures with varying foot sizes and shapes, suggesting multiple non-human entities. Local search and rescue teams told me privately that our area has the highest rate of unexplained disappearances in Alaska. Multiple Alaskan native tribes have similar stories about shape-shifting entities that hunt humans in remote wilderness areas. I moved back to Phoenix and refused to enter any wilderness area larger than a city park. I process insurance claims from my office now, documenting normal human tragedies, AC, car accidents, house fires, medical emergencies, things that make sense. But sometimes, late at night when I'm reviewing claim files, I hear Maya's voice or Ben's voice calling my name from empty hallways in the office building. And I remember Thomas's warning about how Kushtaka never stop hunting once they've chosen their prey. Thomas was right about everything. There are things in Alaska's wilderness that science can't explain, and tourists are their preferred prey. The insurance industry has statistics on everything, but there's no policy that covers shape-shifting predators. If you're planning to visit remote areas of Alaska, hire a native guide who knows the traditional warnings. Listen to the folklore. Don't follow familiar faces in impossible places. And whatever you do, never leave the trail to help someone who shouldn't be there. Because they're still out there, wearing the faces of people you love, calling your name from the darkness. My name is Jim Bradley, and I've been running fishing charters on Alaska's lakes for 8 years now. Before that, I drove delivery trucks for 15 years, long hauls across the lower 48, sleeping in truck stops, living on gas station coffee and whatever passed for food at 2 a.m. But Alaska called to me. The wilderness, the clean air, the chance to be my own boss on the water. I bought a 32-foot fishing boat, got my captain's license, and started Northern Dreams charter service. I thought I'd seen everything the road could throw at me during my trucking days. Blizzards in Montana, flash floods in Texas, brake failures on mountain passes. But what happened on Lake Iliamna last December changed everything I thought I knew about what's really out there in the deep water. Lake Iliamna is Alaska's largest lake, over 1,000 square miles of deep, cold water. Most days, it's peaceful, perfect for salmon fishing. The locals have stories about the lake, old native tales about giant creatures living in the depths. I always figured they were just stories to keep tourists interested. I was wrong. December 5th started like any other charter day. Clear skies, calm water, temperature around 30 degrees. I had 4 passengers that morning: Lisa Martinez, a school secretary from Anchorage; Dave Thompson, an auto mechanic; Karen Chen, who worked at a bakery downtown; and Mr. and Mrs. Foster, an older couple from Seattle celebrating their anniversary. We launched at sunrise from the small marina near Iliamna village. The boat was running perfect, both engines purring, fish finder working fine, radio clear. I'd checked everything twice the night before, like I always do. Fuel tanks full, safety equipment inspected, life jackets counted. After driving trucks for so many years, checking your equipment becomes second nature. Your life depends on it. The first few hours were great. We caught some nice salmon. Everyone was happy and relaxed. Lisa was taking pictures of everything, her first time in Alaska. Dave was asking technical questions about the boat's engines, being a mechanic and all. Karen kept pointing out eagles and other wildlife. The Fosters were just enjoying being on the water together. Around noon, we were fishing in about 200 feet of water when my fish finder started acting weird. The screen showed what looked like a massive object moving underneath us, maybe 60 feet down. At first, I thought it was a school of fish, but the shape was wrong. Too big, too solid. "Captain, what's that on your screen?" Dave asked, looking over my shoulder. I tapped the display. Probably just a log or some debris. Lake's full of old timber. But logs don't move against the current, and they definitely don't show up as one solid mass the size of a bus. I tried adjusting the fish finder settings, thinking maybe the sensitivity was too high. Nothing changed. The object was still there, and it seemed to be, rising toward the surface. "Hey, look at that," Karen said, pointing off the starboard side. About 50 yards away, something dark was moving just under the water. At first it looked like a shadow, but shadows don't create wakes. Whatever it was huge and moving fast. "Probably just a log rolling in the current," I said, but my voice didn't sound as confident as I wanted it to. Then Lisa screamed. Right next to our boat, maybe 10 feet away, something broke the surface. At first I thought it was debris or maybe a fallen tree. But then I saw the head. It was massive, bigger than my truck's cab, with dark green, almost black skin that looked like wet leather. The eyes were yellow, huge as dinner plates, and they were looking right at us. Not just looking, studying us. The head was shaped like a horse's, but longer, with a mouth full of teeth the size of railroad spikes. "What the hell is that?" Dave shouted. The creature's head swayed back and forth, those yellow eyes never leaving our boat. Then it slipped back under the water without making a sound. For a moment, nobody moved. We all just stared at the spot where it had disappeared. "Did everyone see that?" I asked. 4 heads nodded. I grabbed the radio. Coast Guard, this is Northern Dreams, on Lake Iliamna. We have a situation." "Northern Dreams, this is Coast Guard Station Kodiak. What's your situation? How do you explain what we'd just seen?" "We've encountered some kind of large marine animal, requesting immediate assistance." That's when the boat shuddered. Something had hit us from underneath, hard. The impact threw Lisa against the cabin wall and knocked Dave to his knees. My coffee mug flew across the deck and shattered. "Jim!" Karen screamed, pointing at the water. Dark coils were rising around our boat, thick as telephone poles. Covered in that same dark green skin, they were wrapping around our hull like massive, Snakes. The boat groaned. Fiberglass cracked with sounds like gunshots. Water started spraying through new gaps in the hull. "Mayday, mayday," I shouted into the radio. "This is Northern Dreams on Lake Iliamna. Something large struck our boat. We're taking on water." The creature's head surfaced again, this time on the port side. Those yellow eyes stared at me through the cabin window. The thing was intelligent. I could see it in those eyes. It wasn't just attacking randomly. It was thinking, planning. One of the coils, had to be the tail, came up out of the water like a massive whip. It slammed down on the deck between where the Fosters were standing, sending them both flying. Mrs. Foster hit the railing hard and went over the side. "Mr." Foster jumped in after her without hesitation. "Man overboard," I yelled, but the creature's thrashing was making huge waves that pushed our boat away from where they'd gone under. I threw the engines into gear, trying to maneuver closer, but the coils around our hull were tightening. The boat was listing to starboard now, taking on water fast. Through the churning water, I caught glimpses of the Fosters. They were trying to swim toward us, but something was moving underneath them, something big. Then they were gone. Just like that, no scream, no splash. The water went calm where they'd been swimming, as if they'd never existed. "Where are they?" Lisa was crying, hanging onto the cabin door. "Where did they go?" The creature's head appeared again, closer this time. Water dripped from its massive jaws. There was something red caught between its teeth. "We need to abandon ship," I said. "Everyone into the life rafts. Now." I activated the emergency inflation for both life rafts, while Dave and Karen helped Lisa get her life jacket secured. The boat was listing worse now, the deck tilting at a dangerous angle. The first life raft inflated and hit the water. Dave helped the women climb down into it, while I grabbed the emergency supplies and radio. "Coast Guard, this is Northern Dreams. We're abandoning ship. 4 souls in life rafts. 2 passengers lost overboard. Copy Northern Dreams. Helicopter en route. ETA 40 minutes. 40 minutes. We had to survive 40 minutes in the water with that thing. I climbed into the second life raft just as my boat rolled over completely. 8 years of work, my entire business, disappearing under the dark water. That's when I realized our nightmare was just beginning. The creature hadn't left. I could see its shadow moving underneath our rafts, a massive dark shape maybe 60 feet long. Every few minutes, it would surface just enough to show us those yellow eyes, then disappear again. "It's playing with us," Dave whispered, "like a cat with mice." The shadow would circle one raft, then the other. Sometimes it would bump us from below, not hard enough to flip us, but enough to let us know it was there, enough to keep us terrified. "Why isn't it attacking?" Karen asked. "Maybe it's full," Lisa said quietly. I didn't want to think about what that meant. For over an hour, we floated there with that thing circling beneath us. Every time someone moved, every time a wave rocked the rafts, we held our breath waiting for those massive coils to wrap around us. Then we heard it, the most beautiful sound in the world. Helicopter rotors. The Coast Guard chopper appeared over the ridge, and suddenly the shadow under our rafts vanished. Whatever that creature was, it didn't want to be seen by anyone else. The rescue was textbook perfect. They pulled all 4 of us up one by one. As we flew away, I looked down at the lake. The water was calm and peaceful, like nothing had ever happened. But I knew better. The official report called it an unexplained marine animal encounter. The Coast Guard investigators found pieces of my boat washed up on shore, but the damage patterns didn't match anything they'd seen before. Crushing marks and punctures that didn't fit any known sea life. Mr. and Mrs. Foster's bodies were never found. The search went on for days, but Lake Iliamna is deep, over 900 feet in some places. Deep enough to hide anything. All 4 of us survivors passed lie detector tests. We all told the same story. But who's going to believe a story about a 60-foot lake monster? I sold what was left of my charter business 2 weeks later, went back to driving trucks. Long hauls, sleeping in truck stops, living on gas station coffee. But now when I'm driving at night through empty country, I find myself thinking about deep water and yellow eyes. The locals weren't surprised by our story. They've been telling tales about the Tizaruk for generations, giant serpents that live in Alaska's deepest lakes. The elders just nodded when they heard what happened to us. Should have listened to the old warnings, one of two them told me. I won't fish Lake Iliamna again, none of us will. But sometimes, when I'm hauling freight past a lake or river, I catch myself wondering what else might be living in the deep water. What other things the old stories got right? Dave moved back to the lower 48. Lisa transferred to a school in Fairbanks. Karen sold her bakery and left Alaska entirely. We all scattered, like survivors of some terrible accident we couldn't talk about. But we know what we saw. We know what took the Fosters. And we know it's still out there, waiting in the deep water of Lake Iliamna. If you ever go fishing up there, remember this. When the fish finder shows something too big to be a fish, and the old-timers start talking about things that live in the deep water, maybe it's time to head back to shore. Some things in the wilderness are better left alone. My name is Officer Jake Morrison, and I've been with the Alaska State Police for 12 years. I started as a trooper in Anchorage, worked my way up through investigations, and for the past 4 years I've been assigned to the Nome District. Out here, we cover territory bigger than most states, dealing with everything from domestic disputes to search and rescue operations in some of the most remote wilderness on Earth. I've pulled bodies from frozen rivers, tracked down missing hunters, and investigated more unexplained disappearances than I care to count. But what happened in January 2024, 30 miles outside Nome, changed everything I thought I knew about my job and what's really out there in the Alaskan wilderness. The call came in on January 24th at 6:42 a.m. A cabin rental company reported that 3 tourists had failed to check out and weren't responding to phone calls. Sarah Kim, Mike Rodriguez, and Jessica Williams had rented the Whitefish Lake cabin for a week-long Aurora viewing vacation. The cabin was way out there, 30 miles from the nearest road, accessible only by snowmobile or bush plane. The rental company had tried radio contact for 2 days with no response, which wasn't unusual. Cell service was non-existent out there, and tourists often ignored check-in protocols, but company policy required a welfare check after 48 hours of no contact. I grabbed my partner, Trooper Lisa Chen, and we loaded our snowmobiles onto the trailer. The weather forecast showed clear skies but minus 20 degrees, pretty standard for January. We'd done dozens of these welfare checks before. Usually we'd find tourists who'd lost track of time or had equipment problems. Sometimes we'd find them drunk and having too good a time to remember checkout dates. The worst cases were usually medical emergencies or accidents with the wood stove. The drive to the trailhead took 2 hours on icy back roads. We unloaded the snowmobiles and checked our gear, emergency, medical kit, radio equipment, GPS units, survival gear for overnight if needed. The cabin was 12 miles into the wilderness, following a marked trail that wound through dense spruce forest and across several frozen lakes. It was the kind of place people came to get completely away from civilization. The ride-in was routine until we hit Whitefish Lake. The cabin sat on the far shore, a modern log structure with solar panels and a satellite dish. From a distance, everything looked normal. Smoke was coming from the chimney, which was a good sign. But as we got closer, I noticed something that made me slow down. There were tracks everywhere in the snow around the cabin. Not just boot prints from the 3 tourists, but other tracks I couldn't immediately identify. They looked almost human but wrong somehow, too long, with what appeared to be webbed markings between the toes. And there were a lot of them, circling the cabin in patterns that looked deliberate. We parked the snowmobiles and approached on foot. "Hello," I called out. "Alaska State Police, we're doing a welfare check." No response. The windows were dark, curtains drawn. I knocked on the front door. Solid wood. No answer. Chen walked the perimeter while I tried to peer through gaps in the curtains. The strange tracks were everywhere, some looking fresh despite no snowfall for 3 days. "Jake, you need to see this," Chen called from the back of the cabin. She was standing near the bedroom windows, pointing at deep scratches in the wood siding. They looked like claw marks, but bigger than any bear I'd seen. And there was something else. Carved symbols in the wood that definitely weren't there when the cabin was built. They looked almost like writing, but not in any alphabet I recognized. We tried the radio to call for backup, but got nothing but static. GPS was working fine, so we knew exactly where we were, but communication was dead. Not unusual this far out, but it always made me nervous. Chen tried her cell phone even though we knew there was no service. Nothing. "We need to get inside," I said. Standard procedure for wellness checks when nobody answered and there were signs of possible trouble. I tested the front door, locked, but the back door was slightly open, which set off every alarm bell in my head. Who leaves doors open in -20 weather? The back door opened into a mudroom filled with coats and boots. 3 sets of winter gear hung on hooks, looking like the tourists had just stepped out for a minute. But the inner door to the kitchen was wide open, and cold air was flowing through the whole cabin. "Police, is anyone here?" Chen called out as we entered the kitchen. The place was a mess, but not like there'd been a struggle, more like people had left in a hurry. Dishes in the sink, food left out on the counter, coffee pot still on but empty. A laptop computer sat open on the kitchen table, screen dark. I pressed the space bar and the screen came to life. Video editing software was open, showing what looked like security camera footage. The timestamp showed January 21st, 3 days ago. I hit play and watched grainy footage of the area around the cabin. At first it looked normal, just snow and trees. Then I saw movement. Figures were walking around the cabin perimeter. At first glance they looked human, but something was off about the way they moved. Too fluid, too graceful for people walking in deep snow. And when the camera caught them in better light, I could see they were wrong. Elongated limbs, oversized heads, and when one turned toward the camera, I got a glimpse of a face that made my stomach drop. It was almost human, but stretched out, like someone had pulled the features too far apart. Large, dark eyes, pale skin with a bluish tint, and what looked like gills on the sides of the neck. The thing stared directly at the camera for several seconds before moving away. "Chen, look at this," I said, rewinding the footage. She watched over my shoulder, and I heard her breath catch. "What the hell is that thing?" I kept scrolling through the footage. There were hours of video, showing multiple figures circling the cabin over several nights. In some clips, you could hear audio, voices that sounded human, but were saying things in a language I didn't recognize. And then, in footage from January 20th, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A woman walked out of the cabin at 3:42 a.m. Based on the description we'd been given, it was Sarah Kim, the elementary teacher. But she was walking in just her pajamas and bare feet through snow that was knee-deep. She moved like she was sleepwalking, heading straight toward a group of the humanoid figures waiting at the tree line. They surrounded her, and the whole group disappeared into the forest. The next day's footage showed a similar scene with who had to be Jessica Williams, the pharmacy technician. She walked out in the middle of the afternoon, also underdressed for the weather, heading toward the same area where the figures waited. The final footage was from January 21st. A man, probably Mike Rodriguez, sat alone in the cabin talking to the camera. His voice was shaky, and he kept looking toward the windows. "They're in my head now," he said. "I can hear them promising to reunite me with Sarah and Jessica. They say it won't hurt, that I'll be happier with them under the ice. I know I should run, should try to get help, but I can't make myself leave. It's like they've got some kind of hold on me." The footage cut to black. According to the timestamp, that was the last recording. Chen and I searched the rest of the cabin. 3 beds, but only one looked like it had been slept in recently. Personal belongings were still there. Suitcases, cameras, phones charging on the nightstand. Everything you'd expect tourists to take with them if they left voluntarily. In the main room, I found a Blandel guest book left by the rental company. Most entries were typical tourist comments about the beautiful scenery and peaceful location, but one entry, written in a different handwriting, caught my attention. It was signed by what looked like an Inupiat family name, and it said, "Beware the Kalupalik during winter months. They come from beneath the ice to steal the unwary." I'd heard that word before, Kalupalik. It was from Inuit mythology, ISED, creatures that lived under the sea ice and kidnapped people, especially children. I'd always assumed they were just stories told to keep kids from wandering too close to dangerous ice. But looking at that security footage, I wasn't sure what to believe anymore. We spent another hour documenting the scene and collecting the digital evidence. The whole time, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Every few minutes I'd catch movement in my peripheral vision, but when I turned to look, there was nothing there but trees and snow. As we prepared to leave, Chen pointed out something I'd missed. The strange tracks around the cabin weren't random. They formed a clear pattern, circling the building in concentric rings, like some kind of ritual or territorial marking, and they were all heading toward the lake. We followed the tracks to the shoreline, where they disappeared at the edge of the ice. But the ice itself looked wrong. It was thick enough to walk on, had to be, given the temperature, but it was unusually clear, almost like glass. And when I knelt down to examine it closer, I could swear I saw movement underneath. Dark shapes gliding just below the surface, too large and too organized to be fish. As I watched, one of them rose closer to the bottom of the ice, and for just a moment, I saw a pale face looking up at me through several feet of frozen water. The same elongated features, the same dark eyes I'd seen in the security footage. I stumbled backward, grabbing Chen's arm. "We need to go. Now." The ride back to the trailhead was the longest 12 miles of my life. Every shadow between the trees looked like it might be hiding something. Every sound made by our snowmobiles echoed back from the forest in ways that didn't sound quite natural. And I kept feeling like we were being followed, even though I never saw anything when I looked back. We reported our findings to the district commander, but what do you put in an official report? 3 tourists disappeared under suspicious circumstances. Possible involvement of unknown individuals. Case remains under investigation. We submitted the digital evidence, but somehow the video files were corrupted by the time they reached the crime lab. The audio was just static, and the video showed nothing but empty snow around the cabin. A full search and rescue operation was launched the next week. Teams with dogs, helicopters, the works. They found no trace of Sarah Kim, Mike Rodriguez, or Jessica Williams. No bodies, no clothing, no evidence they'd ever left the immediate area around the cabin. The case officially remains open, but it's been classified as a missing persons investigation with suspected foul play by persons unknown. The rental company has since taken that cabin off their booking list. Too many insurance complications, they said. The state has posted warnings about winter travel in that area, citing increased bear activity and unpredictable ice conditions. Officials recommend that tourists avoid the Whitefish Lake region between December and March. I transferred to the Fairbanks district 6 months later. Told my superiors I wanted to be closer to my aging parents, which was partly true. But the real reason was that I couldn't handle working cases in the Nome area anymore. Every missing person report, every welfare check, every time someone didn't come back from a winter camping trip, I'd think about those faces under the ice and wonder if the Kalapalik had found new victims. Lisa Chen quit the force entirely. Last I heard, she moved to Phoenix and works mall security now. Says she never wants to see snow again. I still have nightmares about that clear ice and the shapes moving underneath. Sometimes I wake up hearing voices calling my name in that strange language from the audio recordings. My wife thinks I have PTSD from the job, and she's probably right. But it's not from the usual things cops see. It's from learning that some of the old stories, the ones we dismissed as primitive superstition, might have more truth to them than we wanted to believe. If you're planning a winter trip to remote Alaska, especially anywhere near Nome, listen to the local warnings. The Inupiat people have lived here for thousands of years, and their stories exist for good reasons. Not everything in the wilderness is what it appears to be, and some hungers are older and stranger than anything you'll find in a textbook. The 3 tourists are still listed as missing. Officially, we have no idea what happened to them. But on the coldest winter nights, when the aurora lights dance green across the sky, I sometimes wonder if they're still out there under the ice, keeping the Kalupalik company in whatever dark world exists beneath the frozen surface of Alaska's most remote lakes. My name is Dr. Amanda Foster, and I've been a wildlife photographer and researcher for the University of Alaska for 12 years. I started as a graduate student documenting caribou migration patterns, worked my way up through countless expeditions across the Arctic, and earned my doctorate studying predator-prey relationships in remote wilderness areas. I've faced charging moose, survived 3-day blizzards, and photographed grizzlies from distances that would make most people's hands shake. But what happened during my September 2024 expedition to the Katmai region changed everything I thought I knew about the animals I'd dedicated my life to studying. What we encountered out there wasn't just a bear, it was something that shouldn't exist. The university had approved funding for a civilian photography workshop, one of those outreach programs where we take amateur photographers into the field to document wildlife behavior while funding real research. It's good publicity and helps pay for equipment. I'd done dozens of these trips, usually to safer locations like Denali or the Kenai Peninsula. But this time, the grant specifically requested documentation of brown bear salmon fishing behavior in the remote Katmai backcountry, 2 miles from the nearest established camp. My team consisted of 2 civilians who'd paid substantial fees to join the expedition. Rick Sullivan was a hardware store clerk from Minneapolis, probably in his early 40s, who'd invested in some seriously expensive camera equipment, a Canon EOS R5 with a 600mm telephoto lens that cost more than most people's cars. He knew his gear inside and out, had genuine enthusiasm for wildlife, and wasn't the typical tourist looking for easy shots. Janet Morris was an office manager from Detroit, an experienced hiker who wanted to combine her love of photography with an Alaska adventure. She carried a reliable Nikon D850 and had clearly done her research on bear behavior and safety protocols. We flew into the region on September 3rd, establishing base camp about 2 miles from a major salmon run that the university's aerial surveys had identified as particularly active. I set up 12 motion-activated trail cameras throughout a 3-square-mile area, each one equipped with infrared capability and cellular data transmission back to our main camp. These cameras were my primary research tools, Reconyx Hyperfire models that could capture images every half-second when triggered and had battery life lasting months in cold weather. The first 3 days went exactly as planned. We documented approximately 15 individual brown bears, cataloged their fishing techniques, territorial disputes, and mother-cub interactions. Rick got some incredible shots of bears snatching salmon mid-leap, and Janet was documenting the complex social hierarchy that develops around productive fishing spots. My trail cameras were transmitting regular data showing normal bear behavior, patterns, exactly what the university expected for their wildlife database. Then, on September 6th, camera trap number 7 captured something that made me question my equipment's calibration. The timestamp showed 4:47 a.m. when the motion sensor triggered. The first image showed a massive brown bear approaching the salmon stream, but this animal was easily 12 feet tall when standing upright. I'd been studying Alaskan brown bears for over a decade, and the largest verified specimens top out around 10 feet. This bear was significantly larger, with proportions that seemed almost exaggerated, like someone had scaled up a normal bear by 30%. Rick, Janet, you need to see this footage. I called them over to my laptop where I was reviewing the overnight camera data. This specimen is significantly larger than any recorded Alaskan brown bear. We might be looking at an unknown subspecies. Rick adjusted his glasses and leaned in. That bear is massive, way bigger than anything we've seen so far. Look how the other bears completely avoid that area now. He was right. The subsequent images showed every other bear in the vicinity had cleared out entirely. But what really bothered me was the behavior I was documenting. This large bear wasn't just fishing, it was engineering its environment. The images showed it deliberately stacking rocks to create salmon-catching dams, manipulating fallen logs to redirect water flow, and using tools in ways that were completely unknown in ursine species. Janet studied the images with the careful eye of someone who'd spent years managing complex data systems. Normal bears don't engineer their environment like this. This animal is showing near-human intelligence levels. That evening, I transmitted the images to Dr. Peterson, my department head, via satellite internet. His response came back within hours. Extraordinary footage. Continued documentation. Have you verified camera calibration? I'd checked and rechecked everything. The cameras were functioning perfectly. GPS coordinates confirmed, timestamps synchronized. This bear was real, it was massive, and it was displaying impossible intelligence. On September 7th, camera trap number 4 captured footage that defied biological possibility. The motion sensor triggered at 6:23 a.m., and the first few frames showed the giant bear approaching from the north. But as I reviewed the images frame by frame, the bear's body mass and height appeared to fluctuate dramatically. In frame 1, it was the massive 12-foot specimen. By frame 15, it appeared to be a normal 8-foot bear. Frame 23 showed it massive again. The transformations occurred over seconds, with no logical explanation. This footage defies biological possibility. I told Rick and Janet as we huddled around my laptop, bears cannot alter their physical dimensions. Rick, who'd been editing his own photos on his camera's LCD screen, looked up. Maybe there's multiple bears, similar coloring? I showed him the enhanced analysis I'd done, tracking specific markings and scars that proved this was the same individual animal. Same distinctive scar over the left eye, same white patch on the shoulder. It's definitely the same bear. That afternoon, I made contact with Peter Kasayuli, a Yupik elder from the nearest village, using my satellite phone. When I described what we documented, his response chilled me. Tornarsuk, he said immediately. Not bear like others. Can become many sizes, many forms. Very dangerous to humans. He explained that traditional stories described shape-shifting spirit bears that guarded certain territories and grew hostile toward intruders. According to the legends, Tornarsuk could appear as normal bears but possessed supernatural abilities and intelligence far beyond any natural animal. You must leave immediately, Peter warned. Tornarsuk targets those who invade its territory. It will study you, learn your patterns, then hunt you. I thanked him for the information, but my scientific training made me skeptical of folklore explanations. I had video evidence of unprecedented bear behavior, but supernatural shapeshifting seemed impossible. That decision to stay would haunt me forever. September 8th brought our first direct encounter with whatever this thing was. All three of us began reporting the same sensation, a constant feeling of being watched while working near the salmon streams. It wasn't the normal awareness you develop in bear country. This was different, more intense, like something with human-level intelligence was studying our every move. Every time I set up for a shot, I can sense something huge watching me from the forest, Rick told me as we reviewed his morning photos. It's not paranoia. Something is definitely out there. But the impossible part was that we were all seeing the massive bear in multiple locations simultaneously. At 2:15 p.m., Janet reported seeing it on the north side of the river, while Rick spotted it on the south bank at exactly the same time. When I checked my trail cameras later, they confirmed bear presence in locations that were miles apart within the same time frame. This is impossible, Janet said, reviewing the camera data with me. I swear I saw that massive bear on both sides of the river at the same time. Even more disturbing, the bear seemed to know about our surveillance equipment. It began deliberately triggering motion cameras, positioning itself perfectly in frame, staring directly into the lenses for extended periods. The images showed an intelligence in its eyes that was completely unnatural for any bear I'd ever studied. It knows about our cameras and is performing for them, I noted in my research log. This level of awareness is unprecedented in ursine behavior. September 9th marked the beginning of open hostility. I woke to find that 3 of our equipment caches had been destroyed during the night. Not just scattered by curious animals, deliberately destroyed. The waterproof containers had been torn open with surgical precision, their contents methodically shredded. But most disturbing were the claw marks left behind. These claw marks go 6 inches into solid wood, Rick observed, measuring the gouges with his ruler. No normal bear has that kind of strength. The spacing of the claw marks was wrong too wide, too deep, created by something with far more powerful musculature than any known bear species. It was marking territory, but also sending a message. This was a warning. That afternoon, the psychological warfare began. The massive bear started appearing at the edge of our camp, positioning itself about 100 yards away, then standing motionless for hours. It would stare at us with that unnatural intelligence, never approaching, never retreating, just watching and waiting. It's not acting like an animal, Janet whispered, as we observed it through binoculars. It's studying us, learning our patterns, planning something. The most unsettling part was watching it change size. When any of us approached to get a better look, the bear would visibly shrink from its massive proportions down to normal bear size. But the moment we backed away, it would expand again, like some impossible biological accordion. I'm documenting shape-shifting in real time, I wrote in my research notes. This contradicts everything we know about mammalian biology. September 10th brought tragedy. Rick decided to venture out alone for dawn photography, convinced he could get prize-winning shots of the massive bear during the golden hour. I tried to dissuade him, but he was determined, and I couldn't physically restrain a paying client from making his own decisions. His camera's memory card, which we found 3 hours later, told the horrifying story. The images showed Rick approaching what appeared to be a normal-sized bear fishing near the stream. The shots were beautiful, professional quality work capturing classic Alaskan wildlife behavior. But then the sequence changed. The bear began growing larger in frame after frame, not because Rick was getting closer, but because the animal was expanding rapidly to its massive size. The final image showed Rick's realization of danger. His camera tilted at an odd angle, as if he'd stumbled backward in fear. Then 3 hours of empty forest, the camera continuing to record automatically until the battery died. Janet and I searched extensively but found no trace of Rick anywhere. No blood, no signs of struggle, no torn clothing, nothing. But during our search, we found pieces of his expensive camera equipment arranged in obvious locations, as if the Tornersuk was mocking our rescue efforts. "Rick's been gone for 8 hours, Janet said as darkness fell. "This thing took him, didn't it?" I couldn't answer her. My scientific training demanded evidence, but the evidence pointed to something impossible. September 11th brought the final horror. That evening, as Janet and I were reviewing the day's fruitless search efforts, she suddenly looked up from her camera. "Do you hear that?" she asked. "Rick's calling for help." I listened carefully but heard only the normal sounds of the Alaskan wilderness: wind through the trees, distant bird calls, the flowing river. "Janet, Rick can't be out there. We've searched everywhere and found his equipment scattered by that thing." But she insisted she could hear Rick's voice perfectly, calling her name from deep in the forest. She described his exact tone, his specific words, even details about where he claimed to be trapped. "I'm going to help Rick," she announced, grabbing her flashlight and heading toward the tree line. "He sounds hurt and scared." "Janet, wait!" I called after her, but she was already disappearing into the darkness, following sounds only she could hear. Camera trap number 9 captured her final moments, walking steadily into the forest, responding to voices that weren't there, while a massive bear shadow followed her path through the trees. September 12th left me completely alone. The psychological pressure became unbearable. I experienced constant sensations of being watched and followed by something just outside my vision. Worse, I began hearing both Rick's and Janet's voices, calling for help from various directions around the camp. The Tornersuk is using their voices to lure me, I recorded in my final research log. Peter Kasayuli's traditional warnings were completely accurate. I abandoned all research equipment and called for immediate emergency pickup via satellite phone. The helicopter extraction couldn't come fast enough. As we lifted off, I could see a massive bear watching our departure from a prominent ridgeline, standing upright, like a person, seeming to wave goodbye. Rick and Janet were declared missing persons. Extensive search and rescue operations found no human remains, but multiple search team members reported sightings of an impossibly large bear that seemed to appear and disappear at will. My research footage has been classified by the university. Officially, I've been reassigned to safer projects documenting urban wildlife behavior. But I know what I saw out there. The Tornarsuk is real. Traditional Inuit and Yupik legends were accurate warnings, and some areas of Alaska harbor things that science can't explain. I've stopped doing remote wilderness photography. Some territories belong to creatures far older and more dangerous than anything in our textbooks. And sometimes, the best survival strategy is simply respecting the boundaries that indigenous wisdom has marked for thousands of years. My name is Jake Wilson, and I've been an insurance adjuster for 12 years. I investigate disappearances for a living, missing persons claims, unexplained accidents, cases where people just vanish without a trace. I thought I understood how people go missing. I was wrong. What happened in September of last year in the Alaska wilderness wasn't just a bear attack. It was something far worse. Something that explains why dozens of tourists disappear in that region every year and why their bodies are never found. The official report says we were attacked by bears. That's not the whole truth, but it's the only truth anyone wants to hear. Before I tell you what really happened, you need to understand the pattern. In my 12 years adjusting claims, I've handled 43 cases of missing tourists in Alaska. Not lost hikers or climbing accidents. People who simply vanished without explanation. The Hendersons from Ohio in 2019. The Kim family from California in 2020. The college kids from Denver in 2021. All different tour companies, all different locations, but always the same region, Intraterm, a roughly 50 square mile area around what locals call the dead zone. The insurance companies pay out the life insurance quietly. The tour operators get sued, shut down, reopen under new names. The state investigators file reports that say animal attack or exposure or accidental death, but they never find bodies, never find evidence. Just empty wilderness and grieving families. I'd processed these claims for years, marking them as probable wildlife encounter and moving on. But something bothered me about the patterns. The missing groups were always small, 2 to 4 people. Always tourists, never locals, and always guided by operators who disappeared along with their clients. When Lisa suggested the bear watching trip, I should have checked my own files first. Should have realized that Carlos Mendoza's authentic Alaska bear experience was advertising in the exact same area where all those other people had vanished. But I was tired of investigating other people's tragedies, tired of denying claims, tired of knowing too much about how things go wrong. I wanted to be a tourist for once, not an investigator. That was my first mistake. Lisa Chen had been cutting my hair for 3 years. We'd become friends after I helped her navigate a water damage claim when pipes burst in her salon. She was one of the few people who could make me laugh about my work instead of just changing the subject when I mentioned insurance. "You need a vacation, Jake," she'd said while trimming my hair in August. "Something that has nothing to do with claims or investigations or people lying to you." That's when she showed me Carlos's advertisement on her phone. Authentic Alaska bear watching experience, $200 per person. Professional guide with years of wilderness experience. See bears in their natural habitat safely. Special September rates, HN's peak feeding season. $200 seems cheap, I said, my professional instincts kicking in. "That's what makes it perfect." Lisa laughed. "For once in your life, don't look for problems. Just enjoy something." Carlos Mendoza met us at a coffee shop in Anchorage 3 days before the trip. He seemed legitimate enough, tone mid-30s, confident, showed us photos on his phone of massive brown bears and satisfied customers. But looking back, I realized something was off about those photos. The tourists looked nervous, uncomfortable, and Carlos's hands shook slightly when he held the phone. "I've been guiding for 5 years, he told us. "Never had an incident. The key is knowing the bears, respecting their territory, understanding their behavior." "What about permits?" I asked. "Insurance?" Carlos waved dismissively. "All handled. I work with the Park Service regularly. They know me, trust me." I should have verified that. In my job, I verify everything. But this was supposed to be a vacation from being suspicious all the time. "The area we're going to is special," Carlos continued. "Not many people know about it. The bears there are different, more tolerant of humans. It's like they understand we're just visiting." Lisa was excited, asking about cameras and weather and what to wear. But something in Carlos's voice when he said different made my skin crawl. The way his eyes went distant, like he was remembering something he didn't want to remember. "Different? How?" I asked. Carlos snapped back to attention. "Just calmer, more peaceful. You'll see." The morning of September 15th, Carlos picked us up at 6 a.m. His truck smelled like cigarettes and fierce sweat, and his hands were shaking as he loaded our gear. "You okay?" Lisa asked. "Just excited," Carlos said, but his voice cracked like a teenager's. "Sometimes I get nervous before the really good spots." During the drive to the airfield, Carlos talked constantly about bear behavior, about salmon runs, about weather patterns. But underneath the chatter, I could hear something else, rehearsal. Like he was reciting lines he'd memorized but didn't really understand. His plane was a 6-seater Cessna, older but maintained. Carlos did his pre-flight check with shaking hands, mumbling to himself. I noticed he checked his GPS unit 3 times, and each time he frowned like it was giving him readings he didn't like. "Equipment trouble?" I asked. "Nah, just coordinates keep shifting. Atmospheric interference, probably." Happens a lot in that area. Once we were airborne, Carlos relaxed slightly. But as we flew northwest toward Katmai, his mood changed again. He kept checking the GPS, and I could see sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool morning air. "There," he said finally, pointing ahead. "You can see it now." The landscape below was incredible. Mountains, dense forest, winding rivers. But there was something wrong with it. The colors seemed muted, like an old photograph. And the shadows fell in directions that didn't match the sun's position. "Beautiful," Lisa said, taking photos through the window. But Carlos wasn't looking at the scenery. He was staring at his GPS, which was now showing readings that made no sense. According to the display, we were flying in 3 different directions simultaneously. "That's impossible," I said, looking over his shoulder. Carlos quickly turned the unit off. "Like I said, atmospheric interference. I know this area by heart anyway. But I'd seen enough malfunctioning GPS units in crash investigations to know the difference between interference and complete system failure. This wasn't interference. This was something else entirely." As we descended toward the landing site, I noticed something that made my insurance investigator instincts scream warnings. There were other aircraft visible below, at least 6 planes and helicopters scattered around the lake shore. But they weren't modern aircraft. They looked old, abandoned, like they'd been there for years. "Whose planes are those?" I asked. Carlos followed my gaze and went pale. I don't know. Must be from other tour operators." But even I could see that wasn't true. The aircraft were covered in rust and vegetation. One helicopter was missing its rotor entirely. These weren't tourist aircraft. They were wrecks. "Carlos," Lisa said quietly, "how long have those been there?" "I don't know," he whispered. And for the first time, I believed he was telling the truth. We touched down on a lake that shouldn't have existed. I'd studied the topographical maps during the flight, HEA, standard procedure for my investigation days. According to every chart, this area was solid forest. No lakes, no clearings, no landing strips. But here we were, taxiing across crystal clear water toward a shoreline that cartographers had never mapped. "How is this possible?" I asked Carlos as he tied down the plane. "What do you mean?" "This lake, it's not on any map." Carlos's hands froze on the rope. Maps are often wrong in Alaska. The landscape changes. But lakes don't just appear, and the abandoned aircraft I'd seen from above weren't scattered randomly. They were arranged in a rough circle around the shoreline, like they'd all been trying to land in the same spot and failed. Lisa was already taking photos, exclaiming about the pristine wilderness. But I was counting aircraft, 7 planes, 3 helicopters, one that might have been a seaplane, all different models, different eras. The oldest looked like it could be from the 1982. "Carlos," I said carefully, "how long have you been bringing people here?" "This is only my 2nd time," he admitted. "But my friend told me about it, said it was perfect for bear watching." "What friend?" "Carlos. Wouldn't meet my eyes. A guy I knew. Used to run tours. He's retired now." Something cold settled in my stomach. Retired? Or missing? What's that supposed to mean? "I process insurance claims for missing tourists, Carlos. 43 cases in the last 5 years, all in this general area." Carlos went white. "You never told me you investigated missing persons. You never asked what kind of insurance I handle." We stood there staring at each other while Lisa wandered the shoreline, taking pictures of flowers that bloomed in colors I'd never seen before, deep purples and electric blues that seemed to glow in the subdued light. "Jake," Lisa called. "Come look at this." She was standing next to a pile of gear, backpacks, cameras, camping equipment. All of it looked relatively new, but it was arranged too neatly, like someone had carefully organized a display. "Whose stuff is this?" Lisa asked. Carlos walked over, and I saw his face cycle through several emotions: recognition, fear, and something that might have been resignation. "I don't know," he lied. But I was already checking the luggage tags. Henderson, Kim, Morrison. Names I recognized from claim files. Families who'd vanished without a trace, leaving behind only insurance policies and grieving relatives. "Carlos," I said quietly, What happened to these people? I don't know, he repeated, but his voice was barely a whisper. That's when we heard the children singing. It was coming from the forest. A dozen young voices singing what sounded like a lullaby in a language I didn't recognize. The melody was beautiful but wrong, like someone had taken a familiar song and changed all the notes slightly. Do you hear that? Lisa asked. Carlos nodded, tears streaming down his face. They always sing when new people arrive. Who always sings? The children, the ones who went missing first. They're still here. My blood went cold. What do you mean, still here? But Carlos was already walking toward the forest, like he was being pulled by invisible strings. They want to meet you. They want to show you the bears. Lisa grabbed my arm. Jake, what is he talking about? I pulled out my phone to call for help, but the screen showed impossible readings. According to my GPS, we were in 17 different locations simultaneously. According to my compass, north was in every direction at once. The singing was getting closer. Through the trees, I could see small figures moving toward us. Children, maybe a dozen of them, wearing clothes from different decades. Some looked like they were from the 1980 seconds, others more recent. Oh God, Lisa whispered. Those are the missing kids. The children emerged from the tree line, and I understood why the gear had been arranged so neatly. They'd been collecting it, organizing it, playing house with the belongings of the dead. They looked normal at first glance, kids ranging from maybe 6 to 16 years old. But their eyes were wrong, too bright, too knowing, and they moved with perfect synchronization, like a school of fish or a flock of birds. Hello, said a girl who couldn't have been more than 10. Are you here to see the bears? Her voice was perfectly polite, perfectly normal. But when she smiled, I saw that her teeth were stained with something dark. Where are your parents? Lisa asked. They went to see the bears, the girl replied. We stayed to wait for new friends. Carlos was walking toward them like he was hypnotized. I brought them, like you asked. 2 more, just like you wanted. Thank you, Carlos, said an older boy. You did very well. What's happening here? I demanded. The children turned to look at me with those 2 bright eyes. The bears are hungry, the girl explained patiently. They need to eat before winter. We help them find food. What kind of food? The children smiled in unison. People food, they said together. That's when I realized what had happened to all the missing tourists. They hadn't been killed by bears. They'd been fed to bears, by children who'd been missing so long they'd forgotten how to be human. The bears protect us, the girl continued, and we protect the bears. It's a good arrangement. Carlos, I said urgently, we need to leave. Now. But Carlos was crying harder now. I can't. They won't let me. I've tried to leave so many times, but I always come back. The dreams? They give me dreams about this place until I can't stay away. What dreams? Dreams about the children calling for help. Dreams about the bears being hungry. Dreams about bringing them new friends. The children started walking toward us, still singing their wrongly tuned lullaby. Behind them, emerging from the forest, I could see the bears. But these weren't normal bears. They were massive, larger than any bear species on Earth. And they moved wrong, with too much intelligence in their eyes and too much coordination in their movements. They're beautiful, aren't they? The girl said. They've been here since before the first people. They were hungry then too. Jake, Lisa whispered, we need to run. But there was nowhere to run. The lake stretched behind us, the forest surrounded us, and the children were spreading out to block any escape routes. Don't be afraid, the girl said kindly. It only hurts for a little while. Then you can stay with us forever. The bears were getting closer. I counted at least 8 of them, each one the size of a small car. But it was their eyes that terrified me most. They looked at us like they were calculating, measuring, deciding how best to make us last. The first group was in 1982, the girl continued conversationally. A family from Texas. They fought very hard, but the bears were patient. After that, we learned it was better to make friends first. People trust children. How many? I asked. How many people have you brought here? The children conferred among themselves in whispers. Counting you? The girl said finally. 137. 137 people. Families, couples, solo travelers, all lured here by unlicensed guides who thought they were booking legitimate tours. All fed to prehistoric bears by children who'd forgotten how to die. Why? Lisa asked. Why do you do this? Because they saved us, said the boy. When our plane crashed in 1982, the bears could have eaten us right away. But they kept us alive instead. Fed us, protected us, taught us how to help them. Help them do what? Survive, the girl said simply. The world is changing. There's less food, less wilderness, fewer places to hide. But people keep coming to Alaska looking for adventure. So we give them what they're looking for. The bears had formed a circle around us now. Up close, I could see that. They weren't entirely natural. Their fur had an oily, iridescent quality, and their claws were too long, too sharp. These were things that had evolved in darkness, feeding on human flesh for decades. Carlos, I said desperately, your rifle. Use your rifle. Carlos laughed bitterly. You think I haven't tried? Watch. He raised his rifle and fired directly at the nearest bear. The bullet passed through it like it was made of mist. The bear didn't even flinch. They're only solid when they want to be, Carlos explained. When they're feeding. The children started singing again, louder now. The melody was hypnotic, and I felt my resistance beginning to weaken. Lisa swayed beside me, her eyes glazing over. Fight it, I told her. Don't listen to the song. But it was too late. The music was in my head now, promising peace, promising rest, promising an end to all the investigations and insurance claims and human misery I'd spent my career cataloging. The bears began to move closer. What happened next defies everything I thought I knew about reality. The children's song reached a crescendo, and suddenly I could understand the words. They were singing instructions, directions for the bears, coordinates for the feeding, promises of fresh meat. Now, the girl said sweetly. The bears became solid. I felt the change like a physical weight settling over the area. The air grew thick, oppressive. The bears went from misty, ethereal shapes to 800 pounds of flesh and bone and hunger. The nearest bear reached me in 2 bounds. Its claws raked across my back, but instead of the sharp pain I expected, I felt something cold and invasive, like the bear was reaching inside me, tasting my memories. Lisa screamed, but the sound was wrong. Too high, too long, like the scream was being stretched through dimensions I couldn't comprehend. Carlos was on the ground, a bear standing over him. But he wasn't being mauled over, he was being drained. I could see the life flowing out of him like visible smoke, and the bear was breathing it in. They don't just eat your flesh, the girl explained, walking calmly through the chaos. They eat your experiences, your memories, your fear. That's what they really need to survive. The bear holding me down lowered its massive head, and I felt its breath on my neck. But instead of teeth, I felt something worse, a pulling sensation, like my entire life was being sucked out through my skin. I saw my childhood flash by. My first day of school, my wedding, my divorce, every insurance claim I'd ever processed. The bear was consuming 43 years of human experience, and I was powerless to stop it. But then, something unexpected happened. As the bear fed on my memories of the missing persons cases, it began to slow down. It pulled back, confused. The other bears stopped feeding too, looking around with something that might have been concern. What's wrong? The girl asked, and for the first time, she sounded worried. The bear that had been feeding on me made a sound I'd never heard before. Part growl, part moan, part human scream. It staggered backward, shaking its massive head. He knows, whispered one of the children. He knows about all of them. That's when I understood. My years of investigating disappearances, of processing insurance claims for missing tourists, had created a kind of immunity. I carried the memories of 137 victims inside my head, and the bears couldn't digest that much concentrated loss and grief. Kill him quickly, the girl commanded, before he contaminates the others. But it was too late. The bear that had tried to feed on me was convulsing now, overwhelmed by the psychic weight of all those unsolved cases. Its anguish was affecting the other bears, spreading like a virus through their supernatural connection. Lisa was still conscious, though barely. The bear, feeding on her, was having trouble too. As my memories leaked into the collective, it was experiencing secondhand trauma from every investigation I'd ever conducted. "Stop this," the girl demanded. But she sounded like a child now, not the ageless entity she'd pretended to be. "You're hurting them." "Good," I gasped. "They deserve to hurt." The bears were backing away from us now, their eyes rolling white with pain. They'd spent decades feeding on individual victims, but they'd never encountered someone who carried the psychic imprints of so many deaths. Carlos was stirring too. Whatever the bears had been taking from him, they'd stopped mid-feeding. He looked around with confused, frightened eyes. "What's happening?" he whispered. "The bears are choking," I explained. They bit off more than they could chew. The children were panicking now, running between the bears, trying to calm them with their strange songs. But the music that had been so hypnotic before now sounded discordant, off-key. "You have to help them," the girl pleaded. "They'll die without feeding." "Let them die," I said. The largest bear, the one that had tried to consume my memories, let out a final, agonized roar and collapsed. As it hit the ground, its body began to dissolve, turning back into mist and shadow. The children screamed in unison, a sound that shattered windows on the abandoned aircraft around the lake. "No," the girl cried. "You can't. They've been here for thousands of years." "Then it's time for them to move on." One by one, the other bears began to collapse. As each one died, the children aged rapidly, decades of suspended time catching up with them in seconds. The girl who'd looked 10 became 20, then 30, then a withered old woman before crumbling to dust. "This isn't over," she gasped with her final breath. "Others will come, others will bring food." But I knew she was wrong. With the bears dead and the children gone, this place would lose its supernatural hold. The lake would disappear from maps again. The aircraft would rust away properly. The missing persons cases would finally be closed. Carlos was in shock, but functional. We helped Lisa to the plane. Her injuries were real, but not as severe as they'd first appeared. The supernatural feeding had been interrupted before it could cause permanent damage. The flight back to Anchorage felt like waking up from a nightmare. Carlos kept mumbling apologies, explaining how the dreams had started after his first trip to the area, have-you dreams that compelled him to return, to bring others. "I didn't want to," he said over and over, "but I couldn't stop myself. They were in my head." Lisa was quiet during the flight, processing what she'd seen. "Those children," she said finally. "How long were they there?" "The first group disappeared in 1982, I told her. 41 years of bringing people to feed the bears. And now it's over?" I looked back at the lake as we flew away. It was already starting to look different, smaller, less defined. The supernatural influence that had hidden it from maps for decades was fading. "Yes," I said. "It's over." The official investigation concluded that we'd been attacked by bears and survived due to Carlos's quick thinking with his rifle. The abandoned aircraft were attributed to decades of illegal landings by unlicensed pilots. The missing persons cases remained open but inactive. Carlos's tour business was shut down for operating without proper permits. He moved to Seattle and started seeing a therapist about recurring nightmares. He never guided tourists again. Lisa required counseling for PTSD, but she recovered faster than expected. "Knowing the truth helps," she told me, "even if no one else believes it." I returned to work processing insurance claims, but I approached missing persons cases differently now. I knew what to look for, patterns that suggested supernatural predation rather than simple accidents or animal attacks. 3 months after our experience, I identified another potential feeding ground in Montana. 4 families had vanished near a lake that didn't appear on any official maps. I convinced the state authorities to close the area pending investigation. They found the remains of 67 people buried around the shoreline. The case made national news as the largest serial killer discovery in Montana history. No one mentioned the children's voices that had been reported by hikers, or the bears that cast no shadows. I've since identified 5 other locations across the Pacific Northwest where similar disappearances occur. Places where hungry things wait in the wilderness, protected by children who forgot how to die. Most of them are still active. The insurance companies don't want to hear about supernatural predation. They prefer explanations that don't challenge reality. Bear attacks, exposure, criminal activity. But I know better now. I know why the Hendersons never came home from their camping trip. I know what happened to the Kim family's hiking vacation. I know why so many tour guides in Alaska seem nervous, reluctant, like they're following a script they don't understand. They're being called, dreaming about places that don't exist on maps, compelled to bring food to things that should have died centuries ago. And every time I close one of these cases, every time I identify another pattern, I wonder how many more feeding grounds are out there. How many missing persons reports are actually supernatural predation that we'll never recognize. The bears are dead, the children have aged to dust, but Alaska is vast, and hungry things are patient. Somewhere in the wilderness, something else is learning to sing lullabies to draw in prey. Something else is teaching children to collect belongings and arrange them neatly. Something else is placing dreams in the heads of unlicensed tour guides, promising easy money for one simple job. I still process missing persons claims. I still investigate disappearances. But now I know the real statistics. In Alaska, 43 people go missing every year. The insurance companies pay out quietly. The families grieve and move on. And in the deep wilderness, things that shouldn't exist wait patiently for their next meal. The pattern continues. The hunger never ends.